My wife's sister announced her pregnancy at my birthday party, then smirked and said, "Sorry, guess I have a more important news to share." Everyone laughed except me. "It's just a joke, don't overreact," my wife said. So the next day, I sent out a very different save the date. And when she saw what it said, she called me screaming. You know that feeling when you think you've got everything figured out? When life feels steady, predictable, maybe even a little boring in the best possible way. Yeah, well, that was me right up until my 38th birthday. I should have known something was coming when Riley started acting all secretive, whispering into her phone and shooing me out of rooms like I was some kind of spy trying to crack the code of her grocery list. "Just trust me," she kept saying with that mischievous grin that used to make my heart skip. "You're gonna love what I've got planned." And honestly, I did trust her. After 12 years together, Riley knew me better than anyone. She knew I wasn't the type who wanted some massive blowout party with a DJ and a fog machine. I was more of a good wine, close friends, and meaningful conversation kind of guy. Simple pleasures, you know? So when she blindfolded me in the car and led me up what felt like a million flights of stairs, I was actually excited. The anticipation was killing me in the best way. When she finally pulled off that blindfold, I nearly lost it. We were standing on this gorgeous rooftop in downtown, the whole city spread out below us like a postcard. String lights were draped everywhere, casting this warm, golden glow over everything. There were candles flickering on every table, and the smell of something incredible wafting from the kitchen. It was like something out of a movie, the kind of setup that makes you think, damn, I married the right woman. "Happy birthday, babe," Riley whispered in my ear, and I swear I got a little choked up. This was it. This was perfect. All our closest people were there, my college buddies who I hadn't seen in months, my parents looking proud as hell, even my uptight boss from the marketing firm who never smiled at anything. Everyone was mingling, laughing, raising their glasses in my direction. I felt like the luckiest bastard alive. The cake was this massive chocolate thing with 38 and still crushing it, written in fancy script. Riley must have spent weeks planning this whole thing, and it showed. Every detail was thought out, from the playlist of my favorite songs to the craft beer selection that included that weird IPA I'd been obsessing over. I was standing there, taking it all in, feeling genuinely grateful for this life I'd built, when I noticed people starting to quiet down. My buddy Marcus was tapping his fork against his beer bottle, that universal signal for speech time. I figured this was my cue, you know? Time for the birthday boy to say a few words, thank everyone for coming, maybe crack a joke about getting older and needing reading glasses. I was actually looking forward to it. I had this whole thing planned in my head about how grateful I was for the people in my life, how turning 38 felt like the beginning of something new and exciting. But then Harper stood up, Riley's younger sister, the one who'd always had a flair for the dramatic, the one who posted 17 Instagram stories about her morning coffee routine. She was wearing this flowy dress that seemed to catch every breeze, and she had this look on her face, like she was about to drop some kind of bomb. Which, as it turns out, she was. "I know this is your special night," she said, and already I could feel something shifting in the room. People were turning away from me, focusing on her instead. She placed both hands on her belly in this deliberate, theatrical way that made my stomach drop. But I just couldn't wait another second to share this news with everyone. The pause felt like it lasted forever. I could see Riley's face out of the corner of my eye, and she looked confused, maybe a little annoyed. Good, I thought. At least she gets it. At least she knows this is messed up. "I'm pregnant," Harper announced, and the whole damn place erupted. I'm talking cheers, applause, people jumping up from their seats to hug her. My own birthday party turned into Harper's pregnancy announcement in about 3 seconds flat. She was beaming, soaking up all the attention like she'd been starving for it. And maybe she had been. Harper was always the type who needed to be the center of everything, who couldn't stand it when the spotlight wasn't on her. But what really got me, what really twisted the knife, was when she looked directly at me. Not with guilt or apology, but with this little smirk. Like she knew exactly what she'd done and was proud of it. "Sorry," she said, shrugging her shoulders in this fake casual way. "Guess I had more important news to share. More important than my birthday. The birthday my wife had spent weeks planning. The birthday that was supposed to be about celebrating another year of my life. Suddenly, it felt stupid and small and insignificant compared to Harper's big announcement. And then, God, this is the part that still gets me, Riley laughed. My own wife, the woman who'd blindfolded me and led me up here, who'd arranged every candle and picked out every song. She actually laughed. Oh, Harper, she said, shaking her head like this was all just some harmless prank. It's just a joke, don't overreact. Just a joke, don't overreact. I stood there, holding my untouched beer, watching everyone I cared about celebrate Harper's news while my birthday cake sat forgotten on the table. The candles were still burning, but nobody was looking at them anymore. Nobody was looking at me anymore. It was like I'd become invisible at my own party. That's when something inside me just shifted, like a switch flipping or a door slamming shut. I wasn't overreacting. I was finally seeing things clearly. The elevator ride down from the rooftop felt like descending into hell, except hell would have been warmer. At least in hell, people acknowledge you exist. Up there, I'd become a ghost at my own birthday party. Harper was still holding court by the time we left, surrounded by a circle of women asking about due dates and baby names while she rubbed her barely there bump like it was some kind of magic lamp. Riley had hugged her sister goodbye for what felt like 10 minutes, whispering something in her ear that made them both giggle. Ready to go, birthday boy? Riley had said, linking her arm through mine like nothing had happened. Like the last hour of my life hadn't been completely hijacked by her attention-hungry sister. I should have said something right then. Should have told her exactly how screwed up that whole situation was. But instead, I just nodded and let her lead me to the car, because what was I supposed to do? Throw a tantrum in front of everyone? Prove Harper's point that I was some kind of jealous, petty asshole who couldn't handle sharing the spotlight for 5 minutes? The thing is, it wasn't about sharing the spotlight. It was about basic respect. It was about understanding that some moments belong to certain people, and you don't just waltz in and steal them because you've got news to share. But trying to explain that to Riley felt like trying to explain color to someone who'd been blind their whole life. So we drove home in complete silence. Not the comfortable kind of silence that happens between two people who've been together long enough to not need words. This was the thick, suffocating kind of silence that fills up the car like smoke, making it hard to breathe. I kept my eyes on the road, hands at 10 and 2, driving exactly the speed limit because focusing on something, anything, was better than thinking about what had just happened. Riley was in the passenger seat, her phone glowing in the darkness as she tapped away. I could see her reflection in the window, and she looked completely unbothered. Happy even. Like we were driving home from a successful party instead of the wreckage of what was supposed to be my night. Harper's so excited, she said at one point, not looking up from her screen. She's been wanting to tell everyone for weeks, but she wanted to wait until she was sure everything was okay. Isn't that sweet? Sweet. That's what she called it. Sweet that her sister had spent weeks planning how to hijack my birthday for her own personal announcement. I gripped the steering wheel tighter and said nothing, because if I opened my mouth, I was going to say something that would start a fight I wasn't ready to have. She texted me like 50 times tonight, Riley continued, still typing away. She's worried you're mad at her. I told her you're not that petty. Not that petty. Jesus Christ. I pulled into our driveway and sat there for a moment after turning off the engine. Our house looked exactly the same as it had when we'd left. Same porch light casting the same yellow glow, same potted plants Riley had arranged by the front door, same everything. But something felt different. Like I was seeing it all through new eyes, or maybe like I was seeing it clearly for the first time in years. You coming in? Riley asked, already halfway out of the car. I followed her inside, watching as she kicked off her heels and tossed them in the general direction of the shoe rack. She was humming something under her breath, probably one of the songs from tonight's playlist. The playlist she'd made for my birthday party that had turned into Harper's pregnancy celebration. I went straight to the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of the good whiskey, the bottle we'd been saving for special occasions. Well, this felt special, all right. Special in the worst possible way. You want anything? I called out, but Riley was already upstairs, probably getting ready for bed and texting Harper some more about baby shower plans or whatever the hell they talk about. I stood there in our kitchen, holding my drink and looking around at all the familiar things. The coffee maker Riley used every morning, the stack of takeout menus held down by a magnet from our honeymoon in Hawaii, the birthday card she'd given me earlier that morning with some cheesy message about growing old together. It all felt foreign somehow, like I was visiting someone else's life. The worst part wasn't even Harper's announcement. It was how invisible I'd become in that moment. How easily everyone had forgotten why we were there in the first place. How quickly my birthday had become background noise to Harper's big news. And how completely okay Riley seemed to be with all of it. "You're not actually mad, are you?" Riley appeared in the doorway, wearing the pajamas I'd bought her for Christmas. She looked genuinely confused, like she couldn't fathom why I might be upset about what had happened. I took a long sip of my whiskey and said nothing. Because if I spoke, if I tried to explain how betrayed and forgotten I felt, I'd say too much. I'd say things that couldn't be taken back. Things about how she'd laughed when her sister made a mockery of my birthday. Things about how she hadn't even noticed when I went quiet for the rest of the night. Things about how she was more concerned with Harper's feelings than mine. So I said nothing at all. Riley waited for a few seconds, maybe expecting me to laugh it off or tell her I was fine. When I didn't, she shrugged and headed back upstairs. "Don't stay up too late," she called over her shoulder. I finished my drink and poured another one, then sat down at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast that morning as a man who thought he understood his life. Now I wasn't so sure about anything. That was the moment something shifted inside me for good. Not just anger or disappointment, but something deeper. A fundamental understanding that the people I'd trusted most in the world didn't actually see me at all. I went to bed without saying goodnight, and Riley didn't even notice. I woke up at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before my alarm was supposed to go off. That's what happens when your brain won't shut up. It doesn't matter how much whiskey you drank the night before or how emotionally drained you feel. Your mind just keeps churning, processing, planning. I'd been lying there in the dark for God knows how long, listening to Riley's steady breathing next to me, and something had crystallized in those quiet hours before dawn. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to pretend everything was fine and go back to being the invisible man in my own life. Riley was still dead asleep when I slipped out of bed, which wasn't surprising. She could sleep through a tornado if she wanted to, especially after a night of celebrating and texting. Me? I've always been an early riser, but this was different. This was purpose driving me out of bed, not just habit. I made my coffee extra strong and fired up my laptop at the kitchen table. The house was completely silent except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old floorboards settling. It was peaceful, actually, the kind of peace I'd been craving for months without even realizing it. No one needing anything from me, no one talking over me, no one stealing my thunder. Just me and my thoughts and a blank screen full of possibilities. I opened up Photoshop and stared at that empty canvas for a minute, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Excitement. Not the nervous, people-pleasing kind of excitement that comes from hoping everyone else will be happy with what you've done. This was different. This was the thrill of having a plan, of knowing exactly what you want to accomplish and having the skills to make it happen. The design came together faster than I expected. Clean lines, elegant typography, just enough visual interest to make people curious without giving anything away. I kept it simple, sophisticated simple, not boring simple. The kind of design that makes people take a second look because something about it feels important, even if they can't put their finger on what. Please reserve Saturday, October 19th. A celebration is coming. That was it. No details, no explanation, no RSVP information. Just enough to plant a seed in people's minds and make them wonder what the hell I was up to. I played around with the font for a while, trying different weights and spacing until it felt just right. The date needed to feel significant, like something worth clearing your calendar for. October 19th wasn't random, by the way. I'd done the math. That gave me exactly 6 weeks to plan whatever this was going to be. 6 weeks to figure out how to make a statement without looking like a complete psycho. 6 weeks to show everyone, especially Harper and Riley, that I wasn't the kind of guy who just takes things lying down. I pulled up my contacts and started building the recipient list. Everyone from last night's party made the cut, except for one very notable exception. Harper's name got skipped right over, like she didn't even exist. And you know what? That felt pretty damn good. My college roommate Jake in Portland. Check. My cousin Lisa and her husband from Chicago. Check. My parents, my work buddies, even that pretentious art dealer friend of Riley's who always talks about his latest gallery opening like he's curing cancer. They all made the list. But not Harper. The email went out at 6:23 a.m., which I thought was perfect timing. Early enough to catch people before their day got crazy, late enough that it wouldn't seem completely unhinged. I hit send and then just sat there for a moment, feeling something I couldn't quite name. Relief, maybe? Or satisfaction. Like I'd finally done something instead of just letting life happen to me. It didn't take long for the responses to start trickling in. My phone buzzed with texts and emails throughout the morning, people asking what the celebration was for, whether this was some kind of surprise party, if they should bring anything. I ignored them all. The mystery was half the point. Riley stumbled into the kitchen around 9, looking like she'd been hit by a truck. She was wearing my old college sweatshirt and had her hair piled up in one of those messy buns that somehow looked effortlessly perfect on her. Under normal circumstances, I would have thought she looked cute. But these weren't normal circumstances. Coffee, she mumbled, making a beeline for the machine like a zombie seeking brains. I watched her go through her morning routine. 2 sugars, splash of cream, 3 careful sips before she was ready to acknowledge the existence of other human beings. It was a routine I'd watched thousands of times over the years, but today it felt different. Like I was observing a stranger. "Did you sleep okay?" she asked, finally looking at me with something resembling awareness. "Fine," I said, which wasn't exactly true, but it wasn't exactly false either. I'd slept like shit, but I felt more awake and focused than I had in months. My phone started buzzing around lunchtime. 3 missed calls from Riley, all within the span of 20 minutes. I was in a client meeting, showing mock-ups for a restaurant rebrand, but I could see her name lighting up my screen over and over again. The 4th call came with a voicemail. "Hey, it's me. People are asking me about some save-the-date thing you sent out. I have no idea what they're talking about. Call me back, okay? This is weird." Weird. That's what she called it. Not intriguing or exciting or even concerning. Just weird. I waited until I got home to deal with her. She was pacing around the living room like a caged animal, her phone clutched in her hand like a weapon. "What is that invite about?" she demanded the second I walked through the door. She was trying to sound casual, but I could hear the edge in her voice. The confusion mixed with irritation that came from being left out of something. I hung up my jacket and loosened my tie, taking my time. Let her sweat a little. Let her feel what it's like to be on the outside looking in for once. "You'll see," I said, giving her the same kind of mysterious smile she'd given me before my birthday surprise. Except this time, I was the one holding all the cards. I was 3 sips into my morning coffee when my phone lit up with notifications. Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Harper had gone nuclear across every social media platform she could get her hands on. I almost laughed out loud when I saw what she'd done. Almost. The video was exactly what you'd expect from someone like Harper. Overly dramatic, perfectly lit, and completely transparent in its desperation. There she was, lying on what looked like an expensive couch in her trendy apartment, holding up a grainy black and white ultrasound photo like it was the freaking Declaration of Independence. The caption was even better. Just in case anyone missed the real news, 2 hearts, baby sparkles, hashtag baby making moments, hashtag pregnancy journey, hashtag blessed beyond measure. She'd tagged everyone. And I mean everyone. People from my birthday party, people who weren't even there, probably half the city at this point. It was the social media equivalent of standing on a street corner with a megaphone, screaming, "Look at me," to anyone within a 5-mile radius. But here's the thing that really got me, the timing. Less than 24 hours after my mysterious save the date went out, Harper suddenly felt the urgent need to remind the entire world about her pregnancy announcement. Coincidence? I don't think so. I screenshot the whole thing before she had a chance to delete it later. Evidence for the file IW. Problem: that you're overreacting or being petty, when really they're the ones who can't handle not being the center of attention for more than 5 minutes. The comments section was a goldmine of fake enthusiasm and performative congratulations. "OMG, so happy for you. This is the best news ever. You're going to be such an amazing mom." The usual social media bullshit that people post when they feel obligated to respond but don't actually have anything meaningful to say. I scrolled through them all, taking my time, really savoring the desperation behind Harper's post. She was worried. Good. She should be worried. My response was calculated, simple, and guaranteed to drive her absolutely insane. I posted a photo I'd taken the night before, me in my walk-in closet, holding up a suit bag from my favorite tailor downtown. Nothing fancy about the shot, just clean lighting and a hint of mystery. The caption was even simpler: getting things ready. That was it. No explanation, no context, no hashtags full of inspirational bullshit. Just those 3 words and a photo that could mean absolutely anything or nothing at all. But Harper would know what it meant. She'd understand that whatever I was planning for October 19th was serious enough to require professional attire. I posted it across all my platforms simultaneously and then sat back to watch the fireworks. It didn't take long. My phone started buzzing with likes and comments within minutes. People were curious, asking questions, making guesses about what I was up to. The engagement was better than anything I'd posted in months, which was funny because I wasn't even trying to go viral. I was just playing chess while Harper was playing checkers. But the real victory came about an hour later, when my phone lit up with a string of frantic texts from Harper herself. She must have been refreshing her social media feeds obsessively, watching my post gain traction while her ultrasound video started to feel like yesterday's news. What are you planning? This is so random. Are you trying to make everything about you? Riley said you're being weird lately. I read each message as it came in, taking my time, letting her stew in her own anxiety. The fact that she'd brought Riley into it was interesting. It meant she was rattled enough to start recruiting allies, which told me my strategy was working perfectly. Instead of responding to her directly, I did something even better. I texted Riley. Your sister seems concerned about my October plans. Weird, considering she wasn't invited to find out what they are. The beauty of that message was its simplicity. It was factual, straightforward, and completely devastating. Because Harper would definitely hear about it, probably within minutes, and she'd realize that her exclusion from my save the date wasn't an oversight. It was intentional. Riley called me 20 minutes later, which was faster than I'd expected. She was at work, probably hiding in a conference room or bathroom stall, so she could interrogate me without her colleagues overhearing. Are you seriously trying to outshine my sister? She hissed into the phone, skipping right past hello. The question was so loaded, so perfectly wrong, that I almost admired its audacity. Riley had somehow managed to frame Harper's attention-seeking behavior as my fault, as if I was the one who'd started this whole mess by having the nerve to be born on a specific day 38 years ago. She tried to outshine me on my birthday, I said, keeping my voice calm and reasonable. Now she's going to watch me shine in silence. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could practically hear Riley's brain working, trying to figure out how to spin this situation so that I was the bad guy and Harper was the victim. It was almost impressive, really, the mental gymnastics required to make me the villain in this story. You're being petty, she finally said, which was exactly what I'd expected her to say. It was Riley's go-to move when she couldn't actually defend someone's behavior. Just dismiss the person calling it out as petty or dramatic or oversensitive. Maybe, I said, but I'm not being quiet anymore. I hung up before she could respond, which felt pretty damn good. For once, I'd gotten the last word in. For once, I'd ended the conversation on my terms instead of letting someone else dictate how things went. My phone buzzed with another text from Harper. You're being so dramatic over nothing. Everyone thinks you're jealous of my pregnancy. I stared at that message for a long moment, feeling something cold and final settle in my chest. Jealous. That's what she thought this was about. She genuinely believed that I was envious of her pregnancy, like I was some kind of desperate wannabe parent who couldn't handle seeing someone else get attention. She'd missed the entire point, which somehow made it even more perfect. I didn't text her back. Instead, I blocked her number and went back to planning my celebration. 3 weeks into October, I was ready to reveal my cards. Well, some of them anyway. The anticipation had been building perfectly. People were asking questions, making guesses, and most importantly, Harper was losing her damn mind trying to figure out what I was planning. Riley had stopped asking directly, but I could feel her watching me like I was some kind of ticking time bomb. Which, in a way, I guess I was. I'd spent those 3 weeks doing research, making calls, and putting together something that would be impossible to ignore or upstage. This wasn't going to be some petty revenge scheme or childish tantrum. This was going to be elegant, sophisticated, and absolutely devastating in its simplicity. Beaumont House was perfect for what I had in mind. It's this old converted mansion about 20 minutes outside the city, the kind of place that oozes old money and quiet power. Dark wood paneling, crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's cars, and a wine list that reads like a masterclass in European geography. The kind of place where deals get made over $100 steaks and conversations happen in hushed, respectful tones. More importantly, it was the kind of place that required reservations weeks in advance, the kind of place that made a statement just by walking through the doors. When people got dressed up to come to Beaumont House, they knew they were attending something significant. I'd booked the private dining room for 8 people. Not because I couldn't afford more, but because I wanted this to be intimate, exclusive, the kind of gathering that would make people feel honored to be included rather than obligated to show up. Malcolm was the first person I called. My best friend since college, the guy who'd been my best man at my wedding and who'd flown in from Seattle for every major moment in my life since we graduated. He was also the only person who'd actually noticed when I went quiet at my birthday party, the only one who'd pulled me aside later and asked if I was okay. I need you to clear your schedule for October 19th, I told him when he picked up. And I need you to trust me on this one. What's going on, man? Malcolm asked, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Riley called me yesterday asking weird questions about whether you were having some kind of midlife crisis. That was interesting. Riley was conducting her own investigation, trying to figure out what I was up to by polling my friends. It made sense, I guess. She couldn't ask me directly because she'd already burned that bridge by dismissing my feelings about Harper's birthday stunt. I'm not having a crisis, I said. I'm having a revelation. Just be here, okay? And we're something nice. Malcolm agreed without asking any more questions, which is why he's been my best friend for 15 years. He knows when to push and when to just show up. My cousin Priya was next on the list. She and her partner Carmen lived about an hour away, and Priya had always been the family member who actually got it. She'd been at my birthday party, and I'd caught her rolling her eyes when Harper made her announcement. Not because she was against pregnancy announcements in general, but because she understood timing and basic social awareness. Dinner at Beaumont House? She said when I called. Damn, what's the occasion? Did you win the lottery or something? Something like that, I said. Just bring Carmen and yourselves. And maybe don't mention this to the rest of the family just yet. Ooh, mysterious, Priya laughed. I like it. Count us in. The work friends were trickier. I wanted people who actually knew me, not just colleagues who felt obligated to show up because we shared an office building. I settled on David from the creative department, the guy who'd been my closest collaborator on the biggest campaigns of my career, and Sarah from account management, who'd become a genuine friend over the years and who'd always been straight with me about everything from client feedback to relationship advice. Both of them accepted immediately, which told me I'd chosen the right people. They were curious about the mystery, but trusted me enough to clear their schedules without demanding explanations. The final guest was Emma, my neighbor from 2 doors down. She was in her 70s, a retired literature professor who'd become an unlikely friend over the past few years. We'd started talking over the fence about her garden, and somehow those conversations had evolved into long discussions about books, life, and the art of knowing when to speak up versus when to stay quiet. Emma had a way of seeing through bullshit that I deeply respected. A celebration dinner, she said when I invited her. How delightfully vague. Should I be prepared for shocking revelations or just good wine? Both, I said, and she laughed like I'd just told her the best joke she'd heard all week. The night arrived with perfect October weather, crisp but not cold, clear skies, the kind of evening that makes you grateful to be alive. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, the navy suit from the photo, a white shirt that fit like it was tailored for me specifically, and the silver cufflinks Riley had given me for our 10th anniversary. Looking good was part of the strategy. Beaumont House delivered exactly what I'd hoped for. The private dining room was elegant without being stuffy, the lighting was warm and flattering, and the staff treated us like we were the most important people in the building. Which, for that night, we were. Everyone arrived within 15 minutes of each other, and I could see the questions in their eyes as they took in the setting. This wasn't just dinner, this was an event. The kind of dinner that gets remembered and talked about for years afterward. Malcolm pulled me aside while everyone was getting settled. Okay, seriously, what's going on? This is either a really elaborate birthday do-over, or you're about to tell us you're running for mayor. Neither, I said, adjusting my cufflinks. Just wait. When everyone was seated and the wine was poured, I stood up at the head of the table. The conversation died down naturally, and 7 pairs of eyes focused on me with genuine attention. When was the last time that had happened? When was the last time people had actually listened to me speak without interruption or distraction? Thank you for being here. I began, looking around the table at these people I'd chosen carefully. Thank you for being the kind of people who celebrate others without needing to be the center of attention. I could see understanding dawning on some of their faces. Malcolm nodded slightly, and Priya's eyes widened with what looked like approval. I asked you here tonight because I wanted to share something with people who actually see me, I continued. People who understand that some moments belong to specific people, and that's okay. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out 8 cream-colored envelopes, each one sealed with the same elegant simplicity as my original save the date. What I'm about to share with you can't be hijacked, interrupted, or turned into someone else's moment, I said, handing out the envelopes. Because none of you would ever do that to someone you care about. The room was completely silent as they opened their invitations. The confrontation came 2 days later, which was actually longer than I'd expected Riley to hold out. I'd been wondering when she'd finally corner me and demand answers, because there was no way Harper had kept quiet about being excluded from my inner circle dinner. The sister grapevine was probably buzzing with speculation and outrage. I was in the garage, organizing my tools, and actually enjoying the methodical process of putting everything in its proper place, when Riley appeared in the doorway like some kind of avenging angel. Except angels don't usually look that pissed off. Why wasn't I invited to your dinner? She demanded, skipping right past any pretense of casual conversation. I looked up from the socket wrench set I was arranging and really studied her face. She was furious, but underneath the anger was something else. Hurt, maybe? Or confusion. Like she genuinely couldn't understand why her own husband would organize a gathering without including her. You really want to know? I asked, setting down the wrench and giving her my full attention. Of course I want to know. It's completely bizarre, having people call me asking about some mysterious dinner my own husband threw without telling me. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? Embarrassing. That's what she was worried about. Not that she might have done something to hurt me, not that our relationship might be in trouble, but that she looked foolish to other people. It was so perfectly Riley that I almost laughed. Instead, I asked her the question that had been burning in my chest for weeks. Did you stand up for me when your sister embarrassed me? Or did you laugh? The silence that followed was deafening. Riley's mouth opened and closed a few times, like she was searching for words that wouldn't come. I could see her brain working, trying to figure out how to spin what had happened, how to make it seem less significant than it was. But she couldn't do it. Because we both knew exactly what had happened, and we both knew exactly how she'd responded. It wasn't that big a deal, she finally said, which was somehow worse than if she'd just admitted she was wrong. Not that big a deal, I repeated, letting the words hang in the air between us. My sister-in-law hijacked my birthday party to announce her pregnancy, smirked at me while she did it, and you laughed. But it wasn't that big a deal. She didn't hijack anything. She just shared some good news. At my birthday party, during my toast, after spending weeks planning the perfect moment to steal my thunder, Riley crossed her arms, settling into that defensive posture I'd seen 1,000 times over the years. It usually worked on me, usually made me back down and apologize for making a big deal out of nothing. But not this time. You're being ridiculous, she said. Harper was excited. She wanted to share her news with people she cares about, and she couldn't wait until literally any other day to do it. It just happened naturally. She was caught up in the moment. I stared at my wife, really looked at her, and realized that she actually believed what she was saying. She'd convinced herself that Harper's announcement was spontaneous, that it was some kind of innocent mistake rather than a calculated move to steal attention. Either that, or she was lying to protect her sister, which might have been even worse. Riley, I said, keeping my voice as calm as possible, your sister practiced that announcement. She knew exactly what she was doing. You don't know that. I absolutely know that. And deep down, so do you. She didn't answer, which was answer enough. That evening, while Riley was at her book club meeting that conveniently happened to be at Harper's apartment, my phone started buzzing with text messages. 5 of them came in rapid succession, all from Harper's number. You're being dramatic. You ruined my pregnancy reveal. Everyone thinks you're jealous. Riley told me what you said. You're acting like a child. This is so pathetic. I read each message twice, taking my time, really absorbing the mindset behind them. Harper genuinely saw herself as the victim in this situation. In her version of events, I was the villain who'd somehow ruined her special moment by having the audacity to be hurt that she'd ruined mine. It was almost impressive, really. The complete lack of self-awareness required to send those messages took a special kind of narcissism. My response was simple and devastating. I opened up my photos and selected the image I'd been saving for exactly this moment. A screenshot of my plane ticket confirmation and the detailed itinerary for my solo celebration trip. First-class seat to Reykjavik, 5 days at an exclusive resort, Northern Lights tour, private dining experiences, the works. The kind of trip that cost more than most people spend on their cars. But the real kicker was what was written across the top of the itinerary. Solo celebration experience, party of one. I sent the image without any caption or explanation, then immediately blocked Harper's number before she could respond. The silence that followed was the most peaceful thing I'd experienced in months. She called me anyway, of course. 14 times between midnight and 6 a.m., according to my call log. No voicemails, just the desperate, frantic calling of someone who'd finally realized they'd pushed too far. I turned my phone to silent before going to bed, so I slept through the entire meltdown. When I checked my phone the next morning, there were also 6 missed calls from Riley and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. Probably Harper calling from other people's phones after realizing I'd blocked her. The most telling thing was what happened next. Nothing. No angry voicemails, no dramatic social media posts, no family members calling to lecture me about being reasonable. Just silence, which told me everything I needed to know about how this was going to end. Riley barely spoke to me for the rest of the week. She'd come home from work, eat dinner while scrolling through her phone, and go to bed early. We were living like polite strangers sharing the same house, which was somehow more honest than anything we'd done in months. On Friday morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Going to stay at my parents' for the weekend. Need some space to think. Space to think. Right. Space to strategize with Harper about how to handle their family's latest crisis. Space to figure out how to make me the bad guy in a situation where her sister had been completely out of line. I crumpled up the note and threw it in the trash, then made myself a cup of coffee and started finalizing my travel plans. For the first time in weeks, I felt completely at peace. 2 days later, I was standing in the international terminal at JFK, feeling more alive than I had in years. My suitcase was packed with thermal layers and waterproof gear, my camera bag was loaded with enough equipment to capture the trip of a lifetime, and my boarding pass read Reykjavik in bold letters that made my heart race every time I looked at it. Malcolm was beside me, scrolling through his phone and showing me pictures of the hotel. Next week, the others were scattered around our gate area. Priya and Carmen sharing a bag of airport snacks, David reading some thick business book he'd brought for the flight, Sarah FaceTiming with her kids to say goodbye, and Emma sitting quietly with a cup of tea and what looked like a leather-bound journal. My chosen family, I thought. The people who'd shown up without question when I'd asked them to trust me. Riley hadn't spoken to me since our confrontation 2 nights ago. She'd slept in the guest room both nights, leaving for work early and coming home late, like she was trying to avoid dealing with the reality of what was happening between us. Part of me had hoped she'd come around, maybe even asked to join us at the last minute. But a bigger part of me was relieved that she hadn't. This trip wasn't about fixing our relationship or proving a point to her. This was about reclaiming something that belonged to me. Boarding will begin in approximately 20 minutes, the gate agent announced, and I felt that familiar flutter of pre-travel excitement mixed with something deeper. This wasn't just a vacation. This was a statement. I pulled out my phone to check the time and saw 17 missed calls from an unknown number. Riley, probably, calling from her office line after I'd blocked her personal phone the night before. There were no voicemails, which told me everything I needed to know about the urgency of whatever she wanted to say. "You good, man?" Malcolm asked, noticing me staring at my phone. "Never better," I said, and I meant it. I powered down the phone and slipped it into my carry-on. Whatever drama was happening back home could wait. For the next week, I was going to be completely unreachable, completely present, completely focused on the experience I'd created for myself and the people who'd chosen to share it with me. The flight to Reykjavik was perfect, smooth, quiet, and full of anticipation. We had a whole row to ourselves in business class, which I'd splurged on because this was a once-in-a-lifetime celebration and I wanted everything to be exactly right. Emma spent most of the flight reading, occasionally looking up to point out something interesting in the clouds below. Priya and Carmen fell asleep holding hands, which was somehow both adorable and inspiring. Malcolm and I talked about everything and nothing: work, travel, the weird ways life surprises you when you least expect it. "So are you going to tell me what this is really about?" he asked somewhere over the Atlantic, when the cabin lights had dimmed and most of the other passengers were sleeping. I thought about how to answer that, how to explain that this trip was about more than just getting away or proving a point. It was about remembering who I was when I wasn't being overshadowed or interrupted or made to feel invisible. You know how sometimes you realize you've been living your life on other people's terms? I said finally, like you've been so focused on keeping everyone else happy that you forgot what makes you happy. Malcolm nodded slowly. Riley and Harper. Riley and Harper, I confirmed. And everyone who laughed when Harper hijacked my birthday. Everyone who thought it was funny or cute or just harmless drama. Including Riley. Especially Riley. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the darkness outside the airplane window. Then Malcolm said something that hit me right in the chest. "You know what I noticed at your birthday party? You disappeared. Like, physically you were still there, but the real you just vanished. It was like watching someone die in real time." He was right. That's exactly what it had felt like. Like some essential part of me had just shut down when Harper made her announcement and everyone started cheering. Like I'd been erased from my own celebration. "Well," I said, "I'm not disappearing anymore." Iceland was everything I'd hoped for and more. Our first morning, we woke up to snow falling outside those floor-to-ceiling windows Malcolm had shown me pictures of. The landscape was otherworldly, all black volcanic rock and white snow and steam rising from natural hot springs. It was like being on a different planet, which was exactly what I needed. We spent our days exploring glaciers and geysers, soaking in thermal pools that felt like nature's own therapy sessions, and eating incredible food at restaurants tucked away in Reykjavik's winding streets. But it was the second night that everything clicked into place. We were outside the city, lying on our backs in the snow, waiting for the northern lights to appear. The sky was clear and cold and full of more stars than I'd ever seen in my life. Emma was telling us about the mythology behind the aurora borealis, how ancient cultures thought they were messages from the gods or the souls of warriors dancing in the afterlife. Then the lights started. At first, it was just a faint green glow on the horizon, so subtle I thought I might be imagining it. But then it began to move, spreading across the sky in waves of color that seemed impossible. Green and blue and purple, dancing and shifting like something alive. "Jesus," David whispered, and I realized we'd all gone completely silent. I pulled out my camera and started shooting, trying to capture something that felt too beautiful and too personal to be real. The aurora was performing just for us, putting on a show that would never be exactly repeated, in a place where Harper couldn't interrupt and Riley couldn't dismiss, and no one could steal the moment for their own purposes. That's when I decided to post the photo. I turned my phone back on for the first time since leaving New York and uploaded the shot I'd just taken. Me silhouetted against the northern lights, arms spread wide like I was embracing the entire sky. The caption was simple: "Sometimes silence speaks louder than applause." I posted it across all my social media accounts and then turned the phone off again. I didn't need to see the responses. I didn't need validation or likes or comments. The message was for one person, and she'd know exactly what it meant. Riley called me 14 times that night. 14 missed calls with no voicemails. Just the desperate attempt to reach someone who'd finally learned the power of being unreachable. I slept better that night than I had in years, surrounded by the kind of silence that only comes from being exactly where you're supposed to be, with exactly the people who deserve to share it with you. The first thing I noticed when I walked into my house was the smell. Not bad, exactly, but different, like someone had been stress cooking or stress cleaning, or maybe both. The air felt heavy, charged with the kind of tension that comes from unresolved conflict and too many sleepless nights. I set down my suitcase in the entryway and took a moment to just stand there, letting my eyes adjust to being back in this space that felt both familiar and foreign at the same time. 7 days in Iceland had changed something fundamental in me. I felt lighter, clearer, like I'd left behind more than just jet lag and vacation clothes. The silence of those vast landscapes had gotten into my bones, teaching me the difference between being alone and being lonely. I'd spent a week surrounded by people who celebrated me without reservation, who listened when I spoke and didn't feel the need to compete for attention or turn every moment into their own personal stage. Now I was back in the house I'd shared with Riley for 8 years, and it felt like returning to a crime scene. The living room was a disaster zone. Throw pillows were scattered on the floor. There were at least 6 empty wine glasses on the coffee table, and what looked like the remnants of several takeout meals were stacked on the kitchen counter. Riley's laptop was open on the couch, surrounded by crumpled tissues and a notebook covered in her messy handwriting. I walked through the house slowly, taking inventory of the damage. The guest bedroom looked like it had been occupied. The sheets were rumpled, and there were clothes thrown over the chair. So she'd been staying here while I was gone, which was interesting. Not in our bedroom, but not at her parents' house either. Like she'd been in some kind of emotional limbo, not sure where she belonged. The bathroom mirror had a post-it note stuck to it in Riley's handwriting. Call Dr. Martinez about couples therapy. Below that, another note. Buy groceries, actual food, not just wine and ice cream. And below that, figure out what the fuck is happening to my marriage. I stared at that last note for a long moment. The profanity was unlike Riley, who usually kept her language pretty clean even when she was upset. But there was something raw and honest about it that hit me harder than all the missed calls and frantic texts I'd been ignoring. My phone had stayed off for most of the trip, but I turned it on briefly at the airport to check for any actual emergencies. No emergencies, but 47 missed calls from Riley, 12 from Harper's unknown numbers, and about 100 text messages that I'd scrolled through without really reading. The overall theme seemed to be a progression from confusion to anger to something that looked like panic. I was still processing the state of the house when I heard Riley's key in the front door. She must have been watching for my return, maybe even tracking my flight. The door opened and closed with unusual care, like she was trying not to wake someone up, and then her footsteps approached the living room where I was standing. "You're back," she said, and her voice sounded hoarse, like she'd been crying or yelling or both. I turned to look at her and was genuinely shocked by what I saw. Riley looked like she'd aged 5 years in the week I'd been gone. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and her clothes looked like she'd been sleeping in them. But it was her eyes that really got me, red-rimmed and puffy, with dark circles underneath that spoke of too many late nights and not enough rest. "I'm back," I confirmed, and waited to see what she'd say next. "We need to talk." She was wringing her hands, a nervous habit I hadn't seen from her in years. "About everything. About what happened. About where we go from here. About..." She gestured vaguely around the disaster zone of our living room. "About all of this." "Okay," I said. "Let's talk." But instead of starting the conversation, Riley just stared at me for a long moment. I could see her taking in my appearance, the tan I'd gotten from all that time outdoors, the relaxed set of my shoulders, the way I seemed completely at peace despite coming home to what was obviously a crisis. "You look good," she said finally, and there was something almost accusatory in her tone. "You look happy." "I am happy," I said, because it was true. Even standing here in the wreckage of our relationship, even facing this conversation that was probably going to be painful as hell, I felt more centered and content than I had in months. "How can you be happy?" The question burst out of her like she'd been holding it back by force. "Our marriage is falling apart. I've been going crazy for a week trying to figure out where we stand. Harper's been calling me nonstop asking what you're planning next, and you just disappeared. You went off to Iceland with your friends and posted that picture like some kind of victory lap while I was here falling apart." There it was. The real issue wasn't that I'd gone to Iceland or that I'd excluded her and Harper from my plans. The real issue was that I'd been fine without them. Better than fine, actually. I'd been thriving. "You made everything about you," she continued, her voice getting stronger as she found her footing in familiar territory, "making me the villain in this story. You embarrassed me in front of everyone we know. You made me look like a terrible wife who doesn't support her husband." I could have gotten angry. 6 months ago, I would have gotten angry. I would have defended myself, explained my position, tried to make her understand why I'd felt so hurt and invisible. But Iceland had taught me something valuable about the power of silence, about the difference between reacting and responding. "Did I embarrass you?" I asked quietly. "Or did you embarrass yourself?" Riley's mouth opened and closed a few times, like she was searching for words that wouldn't come. Because deep down, she knew the truth. She knew that everything I'd done had been a response to being dismissed and disrespected at my own birthday party. She knew that her sister's behavior had been out of line and that her own reaction had been worse. Harper tried to reach out, she said, changing tactics. She wanted to apologize, to clear the air. She feels terrible about how everything went down. Good, I said. She should feel terrible. But you blocked her. You won't even give her a chance to make things right. I walked over to the kitchen counter and picked up one of the takeout containers, examining the label. Chinese food from 3 days ago, judging by the date. Riley had been stress eating and probably stress drinking too, based on all those empty wine glasses. Riley, I said, setting down the container and looking her in the eye. Harper doesn't want to make things right. Harper wants to make herself feel better about what she did. There's a difference. That's not fair, isn't it? I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshot I'd taken of Harper's Instagram post, the ultrasound video with the caption about sharing the real news. She posted this the day after my save the date went out. She tagged everyone from my birthday party. She was so desperate to steal back the attention that she turned her pregnancy into a social media campaign. Riley looked at the screenshot, and I watched her face change as she really saw it for the first time. The desperation, the pettiness, the complete inability to let someone else have a moment without making it about herself. Some people, I said, tucking my phone back into my pocket, only want peace when they're no longer the loudest voice in the room. The silence that followed was heavy and uncomfortable, but I didn't try to fill it. I'd learned the value of letting uncomfortable truths sit in the air until they were properly acknowledged. Finally, Riley spoke. So what happens now? Do we just give up? Throw away 8 years of marriage because of one bad night? This isn't about one bad night, I said. This is about who you chose to be when it mattered. 1 year later, my 39th birthday arrived with the kind of crisp October morning that makes you grateful to be alive. I woke up in my new apartment overlooking the harbor, sunlight streaming through windows that belonged entirely to me. No drama waiting in the kitchen, no passive-aggressive notes on the bathroom mirror, no sister-in-law plotting her next attention grab. Just peace, coffee, and the sound of seagulls outside my window. The separation had been surprisingly quiet. Riley and I had managed to divide our lives without lawyers or screaming matches, like two people who'd simply grown tired of pretending they still fit together. She'd kept the house and most of our mutual friends. I'd kept my dignity and learned the difference between being alone and being lonely. Harper had tried to reach out a few months ago through mutual acquaintances, still convinced that I was the villain in her story. Word got back to me that she was telling people I'd made everything a competition and couldn't handle her happiness. The irony was beautiful. She still didn't understand that it had never been about her pregnancy. It had been about basic respect and knowing when to let someone else shine. I spent the morning exactly how I wanted to, sleeping in, making my favorite breakfast, reading a book without interruption. Then I got dressed in my best suit and drove to the same rooftop restaurant where everything had started a year ago. The hostess recognized me from my reservation and led me to the exact same spot where I'd stood 12 months earlier, watching my birthday turn into Harper's moment. But this time, the table was set for one, with a perfect view of the city and no possibility of unwanted interruptions. I ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu and raised a toast to myself while the sun set over buildings that looked like jewelry scattered across black velvet. Then I pulled out my phone and took a selfie, me, alone at that beautiful table, genuinely smiling for the first time in months. The caption wrote itself. This year, I reserved the whole view for myself. No speeches, no drama, just the joy of showing up for myself. I posted it and watched the responses roll in. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments from people who'd been at that original birthday party. Some asked to reconnect. Others shared their own stories about learning to prioritize themselves. A few even admitted they'd felt uncomfortable about Harper's announcement, but hadn't known how to say anything at the time. I replied to none of them, not out of anger or spite, but because I'd learned something valuable about boundaries. You don't owe your energy to people who only notice you when you're no longer available. You don't need to explain why celebrating yourself matters to people who've already shown they don't understand. The waiter brought me dessert, a small chocolate cake with a single candle, and I made a wish that had nothing to do with other people and everything to do with continuing to build a life where my joy couldn't be stolen or overshadowed. As I blew out the candle, my phone buzzed with a text from Malcolm. "Happy birthday, brother. Proud of you for choosing yourself." That was the only response I needed. Harper and I never spoke again. The silence became permanent, comfortable even. Riley and I separated quietly 6 months after Iceland. Our divorce finalized with the kind of mutual exhaustion that comes from realizing you've been fighting for something that was already dead. She'd wanted a man who didn't make everything a competition. I'd wanted someone who didn't treat my life like a sideshow. Turns out we were both right about what we needed, just not from each other. I moved to the coast 8 months later, trading city noise for ocean waves and opening a small design studio in a converted warehouse overlooking the water. My clients were local businesses and artists who valued creativity over corporate politics. The work was meaningful, the pace was human, and nobody interrupted my meetings to announce their pregnancy. My 40th birthday came with salt air and genuine celebration. I'd invited 12 people: Malcolm, Priya and Carmen, Emma, a few new friends from town, and my neighbor Sarah, who made incredible sourdough bread and had never once tried to steal anyone's moment. We gathered at my studio as the sun set over the water, the space filled with fairy lights and the kind of laughter that comes from people who actually enjoy each other's company. When I stood to thank everyone, the room went quiet with real attention, not the fake politeness of people waiting for their turn to speak. "Thank you," I said, looking around at faces that lit up when they saw me, for being the kind of people who lift their glasses for me, not in spite of me. Malcolm raised his beer. "To second chances and better choices. To knowing your worth," added Emma. "To uninterrupted celebrations," laughed Priya. We toasted, we ate, we told stories until late into the night. No one hijacked the moment. No one needed to be the center of attention. No one made me explain why that mattered. For the first time in years, I didn't have to fight for space in my own celebration. The silence between toasts was comfortable, filled with contentment instead of tension. I'd finally learned the difference between being celebrated and being tolerated. It had only taken 40 years and one stolen birthday to figure out which one I deserved.